name's Cureton, senior journalist for XR Today, and we're bringing you the latest and greatest from the VR, XR, and AR industries. And today we have on Mr. Gary Yost, veteran filmmaker, software creator, and co-director of the WisdomVR Project and the Inside COVID-19 VR project. Now, thanks for joining us, Gary. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Demond, and thanks for inviting me. As you said, I'm a VR filmmaker and a software designer. My background, I'm best known for leading the team that created Autodesk 3D Studio, which is now called 3ds Max. And I led a small group called the Yost Group, who created that in the 1990s. And after I, sold that to Autodesk at the end of the century, I essentially reinvented myself as a documentary filmmaker because that was my true passion in life, and 3D animation tools were really just kind of a digression for me in a way for about 15 years. And throughout my documentary filmmaking period, I've always been looking for a way to get back to stereoscopic and more immersive filmmaking, kind of using a lot of the knowledge that I gained about stereo imaging from the 3D animation days. And so about 3.5 years ago, I started experimenting with some of the newer 360 stereoscopic cameras. And I had such good results with a project I was working on with Zcam, developing a new 10 camera array that I basically built a nonprofit around it to bring stories of elders' wisdom experiences to the younger generation of people who have headsets, to create a kind of a cultural transfer of knowledge from our elder generation into the young people.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's who I am.
And yeah, and it's a very much an honor to have you on today. And yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll go straight into the first questions. We can talk about the most salient one we have for today. So you're up for an Emmy nomination for your critically acclaimed film, Inside COVID-19. So how do you feel about receiving that? And what does this nomination represent to you, both as a veteran filmmaker and from the perspective of the rising 360-degree VR filmmaking industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, of course, it's an honor to be nominated and validated for the work that we're doing. I mean, especially to be nominated in a category along with Felix and Paul Studios, who were great innovators in this field. The work they did on the ISS, the space station, is groundbreaking, technically amazing. And so to be honored with them was even more of an honor than just the nomination itself. I don't really expect to win. If I was voting, I'd probably vote for them because I'm aware of how incredibly brilliant their technical solutions to the problems in the space station were. But yes, it's a great honor, and it just validates the medium that we're working in a really important way. The documentary filmmaking space for 360 VR has been fraught with challenges. There was a moment for a couple of years when Google was supporting the Jump assembler Stitcher, and there was the Jaunt camera and the Yi Halo that a documentary filmmaker could essentially just borrow from Google, and they didn't have to worry about stitching or any of the technical issues. They would just send all the footage back to Google's cloud, and they'd get this beautifully stitched stereoscopic 360 documentary. And then in May of 2019, Google shut down that program, which essentially made it impossible for documentary filmmakers really to go further unless they also wanted to become really hardcore stereoscopic 360 technologists and continue to operate at a very high level of quality within the medium. So a lot of people just couldn't do that. And fortunately, my background as a technologist allowed me to, it inspired me to go deeper and see what I could do with the tools. And so it's a very small world right now. There's only really a handful of people doing very high level VR 360 stereoscopic documentary work, for that reason. And so we're trying to push the medium forward. And I guess the best compliment I've gotten about the film is from John Carmack, who is the CTO of Oculus, who really is responsible for most of this technology. And he said that Inside COVID-19 is a really wonderful documentary that just happens to be in stereoscopic VR 360, and that the medium is maturing. And that kind of says it all. I mean, the medium's maturing. We're helping to push the medium, essentially just making a really great documentary that happens to be in stereoscopic 360.
Lovely answer. And I can only imagine what kind of films they'll create, like in the future, especially with this technology. I mean, we remember the days of the silver screen. Then we go to, different kinds of shooting techniques, and then we go to 3D films, that we could see at Disney World. And now, we're getting into a new medium, a new kind of artwork that we can curate to a lot of people who are, very, very interested in cinematography as well. So very lovely. I'd like to jump into this one. We can dive, I guess, a bit more into the film itself. So we talk about the vision and the theme beside Inside COVID-19. So how did the use of 3D VR filmmaking impact audiences compared with 2D films? And which message does the film try to communicate to people that are watching it?
Yeah, so, our philosophy of documentary filmmaking is that the best way into a story, any story, is through a personal experience. So, the pandemic came along in spring of 2020. We had just finished a series of 9 Wisdom VR experiences for Oculus. They were just published up on Oculus TV. We were planning on getting to our next series, and it was obviously impossible to shoot with elders anymore because of the shutdown, couldn't be around people. And I was introduced to this doctor who had both been very sick with COVID-19, almost died. And that happened while he was preparing his 5 emergency departments he manages for the pandemic itself. And it just seemed like he embodied this dualistic quality of the entire pandemic in one person. And we felt, if here's an opportunity to speak to the wisdom of being a physician and being a patient within the pandemic, all in one person. And so that personal story embodied, in some ways, the entire nature of the pandemic. And so, so our vision and our theme was really to tell this huge, huge story about a global pandemic through the eyes of this one person. And fortunately, he had a philosophy degree before he became a physician, and he was very open about sharing his life, and he became just a really powerful window into many of the feelings associated with all of us, feeling unsafe, curious, wanting to know more. And so he just became this ideal vehicle. And, you asked about, why we did this in VR instead of traditional filmmaking. And of course, we are the WisdomVR Project. I mean, we're working in this medium. We're trying to push the medium forward. But we also felt that we wanted to create the most immersive time capsule of the period that we could create. One of the problems now is that we've forgotten the lesson of past pandemics, possibly because they weren't documented as well as they could have been. The 1918 swine flu pandemic certainly didn't teach us a whole lot of lessons that we used constructively in this current period. And so, we felt that VR would be the perfect medium to give people in the future an opportunity to really feel, excuse me, to really feel how the intensity of of what we've been going through in a way that you couldn't get through just a normal 2D film. There are aspects. Well, first of all, 2D films these days, they feel very limiting to me because they're highly manipulated by filmmakers, and with all these cuts and things, I never get the feeling that what I'm seeing is truly what happened. And the beauty of VR 360 filmmaking is these long shots inside these spaces with people. You just feel the truth and authenticity of the experience in a way that you really don't feel in a highly edited two-dimensional film. And it just seemed like that authenticity was what we wanted to give viewers, because there's so many perceptions of the pandemic, and people have so many opinions about what's true and what's not, that we felt that that veracity of 360 filmmaking, making you feel like you're really there, would kind of cut through the tendency people have to look at things too subjectively. So giving people objective experiences. I'm trying to be kind here about all the, weird misinformation that everyone is spinning around the place. But we felt that if we created like a highly objective experience with someone that was very personal, it would be the best way to capture the pandemic.
No, yeah. The pandemic is, continues on. And so these lessons that we take, especially, through cinematography like yours and other examples, and, it will give, I guess, future generations something to think about, and it will impact them in an emotional way, which is, I guess, the goal of the film.
Absolutely.
In itself.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Let's jump into, I guess we'll go into some more of the technical aspects about the film and I guess your career as well. So we talk about, I wanted to jump down to WisdomVR. And this is your project that you have been working on with lots of wonderful people around the world. You chose VR as the medium for recording humanity's philosophical history. What would you say is the process you use to create these films and to edit the footage? And are there any specific technologies that you use for that project?
Sure.
Compared to the film?
Yeah, that's a wide-reaching question. I'll take the first part first. So our approach. So typically, one of our WisdomVR pieces is around 10 minutes long, and we work with a subject who has something very valuable to impart to others, specifically people with headsets in our case, who tend to be younger people. And we find that one theme that they want to impart. It might be, for example, with one of our subjects, Ruben Margolin, who's a kinetic sculptor, it's the theme that everything in life can be viewed as a wave. And so we work with the subject to develop concepts around the theme that are supported by the location that we're filming in. So we use the location to drive the theme deeper into the subject, into the viewer's psyche. So instead of being distracted by everything that's around you when you're wearing the headset, you can actually listen to the subject who's over here. And when you're turning around and looking at the subject's space, you get more of the story. So we're trying to create story all around you. And so that's really different than watching a 2D film, because traditionally when people watch 2D films, they're very distracted. They've got a phone, they're usually watching on their phone. There's a lot of stuff going on, there's notifications, but in the headset, you're completely isolated from all that. And it's really the only medium where we get to monopolize someone's audio and visual senses. And we take that very seriously. It's, we find it's a sacred space for people to really monopolize their senses. And so we work very hard with the subject that every single shot, which is what we call a chapter, speaks directly to the theme the location speaks to the theme, and you don't really have to think much as a viewer. You just let it wash into you, and it really becomes a part of your experience. So it's not so much like you're watching a piece, you're experiencing a piece. So that's our general philosophy. And when we got to Inside COVID-19, it's not a 10-minute piece, it's a 35-minute piece. And so we had to develop much more of a story arc around the piece, but we still had to use those same techniques to create these chapters where the viewer would feel immersed in each aspect of the story in a way that, really made them feel as if they were there with the subject, in this case, Dr. Josiah Child. So, that speaks to the process. And then you asked about the technology that's used to create
Correct,
it.
yeah.
And I have the camera that we use right here. Would you like me to show it to you?
Sure, go for it, yeah.
Sure. It's actually it's one of only 20 cameras of its kind in the world. So this is
Nice.
a Zcam V1, and it has 10 cameras in a radial array, very tightly packed, which, because each camera has got 190 degrees of field of view, allows for a tremendous amount of overlap between each camera. And because of that overlap, we can create a high quality stereoscopic image, even if objects or people are fairly close to the camera, within 18 inches. No other 3D 360 camera can do that. And it's because of that tightly packed array. And, due to that, the stitching process, which is totally not automated the way the Google Jump platform was, the stitching process is fairly complex. We use a piece of software developed in Spain by SGO called Mystica VR, and it provides a lot of flexibility as to how we take the output of those 10 cameras and create a naturalistic stereoscopic field. And we're very proud of our work in that I think we are producing the most naturalistic stereo of any documentary VR 360 filmmaker out there. And part of that has to do with that camera, and part of that has to do with all the control Mystica gives us in creating that imagery. There's an artifact of that tightly packed camera array, in that even though you can get things very close, because the cameras are so close together, there's a hypostereo effect where things get a little bit magnified as they get close. And so we have to be very careful. If we want a shot that's, that feels very natural, we have to keep the subject about 42 inches away from the camera. But the corollary is we can actually produce an extreme close-up with this camera, which is impossible to do with any other VR 360 camera. There's a great quote by the World War II photojournalist Robert Capa, where he said that if your images are not powerful enough, you're not close enough. And I'm also a photographer. Oops, sorry about that. I'm also a photographer, and I firmly believe that getting close and intimate with the subject is the best way to bring the viewer into the story. So, that's our primary tool for camera capture. And then, we use traditional tools like Premiere and Final Cut and After Effects and, all of those things that everybody uses for post-production. Was there anything else in there that you wanted me to speak to?
No, that covers it pretty well. Yeah, yeah, and especially with the stereoscopic camera, those technologies. People are just now learning how to use that, especially with holographic content. So there's endless possibilities with how these cameras can be applied. Whether it's filmmaking, creating digital twins, things of that nature. You have your LiDAR scanners that will be developed soon. So I'd like to see how the kind of the technologies are incorporated in the future. But thanks for sharing that with us.
I mean, that's a really interesting subject. Photogrammetry, 3D capture, volumetric capture, tremendously interesting field. It's going to be a long time before you can do volumetric capture of an entire space, a subject moving around in their room, compared to capturing a subject on a soundstage. And as documentary filmmakers, we need to capture people in situ, in their space. And so although we've experimented a little bit with volumetric capture, it's all composited with other elements, and that veracity, that authenticity is missing because people are not being captured in their actual environment. So, but I'm following that closely. I'm involved in a group that is developing a 6-stop camera. We'll see how that goes over the next few years. I think it's going to be a while.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Looking forward to the updates. We can get into, I guess, what are the last bits that we'd like to cover for today. So we talk about your work with the Yost group, and that led to the creation of Autodesk 3D Studio and Autodesk 3ds Max. So these are basically the world's largest brands for creating films and industrial content. Now, going back with your career and everything, I wanted to ask you about, how is the software an instrumental tool for creating VR films? And how do you see it reshaping the global film industry in the future? Based on your personal experiences and your role in, shaping the software itself.
Yeah, interesting question. So I did all that work in the 90s, and as I told you earlier, I became a documentary filmmaker afterwards. But I've been, looking to use those tools that I invented in my work, and it was only in this project with Inside COVID-19 where I just had no choice, because I needed to tell the story of the pandemic, and a big part of that story is the story of the virus itself. And a virus, of course, is invisible, right? It's too small to see. And one of the great things about 3D tools are that we can build things that are too small or too large to visualize. And it was when I saw the CDC had created a 3D version of the Viron in March that was used by the New York Times. It's this classic 3D model with the spike proteins in red. And I read a little article about how they did that in 3ds Max just about the time I was starting production on Inside COVID-19. And it just, fired a light bulb in my head and said, well, if the CDC could do that, I could certainly do that to bring the virus in as a character in this film. And so I contacted an old friend of mine, Andy Murdoch, who had done a lot of cell biology animation for National Geographic over the years. And he lived right here in my town and was a little bit bored. And I said, hey, let's tell the story of this virus. Let's show how it works. Let's show how it goes through membrane fusion and viral replication in one of our epithelial cells, and how it gets, multiplied inside the cell. And we embarked on 2.5 months of research, and I was able to convince another old friend of mine, Phil Miller from the Chaos Group, who they make V-Ray and the Chaos Cloud Render, and they donated $30,000 worth of cloud rendering time, because we're now making these incredibly complex renderings at 7K by 7K, which, we'd never done anything like that before. I mean, back in the day, we were just rendering HD, which is a 2K frame. And then, even 4K is, it's an 8K frame, but 7K by 7K is a 49 megapixel frame.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, 4K is a 8 megapixel, HD is 2 megapixel, 7K is 49 megapixels. So it was really daunting to even create these renderings. And we were doing 7 or 8 minutes of animation. So, it was, through a community that I had been a part of for really almost 35 years, we were able to, bring this virus to life as a character in the film to give people a visceral feeling of what it's like inside one of our cells to see this thing come in and invade it and replicate it, and then, use our own body to amplify its deadly characteristics. And so it kind of was full circle for me, where, I had done all that work in 3D, but it became an essential part of my workflow process for this documentary. And so you can imagine what a great feeling that was for me to hook up with a lot of old friends to show the world something they've never seen before. And I've actually I've become really, really fixated on a lot of cell biology issues, and we have plans to go further than that. We've been doing a Unity-based, like an interactive exploration of how our immune system works, and I've got a team put together with some very world-class cell biology animators to provide an in-depth look at how the vaccines work, how mutations work, how our immune system works, and I think that could keep us busy for a while. So it's like the wisdom of our bodies, essentially. Since the WisdomVR Project is my invention, I can move it in any direction I want, and at this point, cell biology and the wisdom of our bodies is something that's very important to me, and I think to the world.
Brilliant. Yeah, and from what I remember from a lot of the different animations you used for the cells, it was captivating. It kind of reminded me a little bit like Fantasia from Disney, and just the depth of the virus moving around the human body and traveling as if it had its own personality, and it was almost like humanizing a character that we normally wouldn't look at as being a human character, or at least being a part of the human body.
Man, Damon, that is really well said, and it's far out. It's exactly what we tried to do, is to make it relatable in a way. Again, because most people just think of the virus as a completely abstract thing, and so we worked very hard to take it out of that abstract realm and give it a personality. Give it this sense that that's truly a real thing, because it is really a real thing. Even though I can't see that virus with my own eyes, it's there. And then 3D tools are just so perfect to bring it to life. So all that personality really comes from Andy Murdoch's skill as an animator. There's this quality that viral particles have called pleomorphism, which is a kind of a non-rigid structural component. And we worked very hard studying the work of David Goodsell at the Scripps Institute for Computational Biology to understand the pleomorphic properties of the virion, to understand how membrane fusion happens. And so these particles are very animated, the way they move around the world. And we were very excited to be able to capture some of that.
Okay. Oh, lovely. Well, I guess, we can wrap it up here, but it was absolutely, amazing to hear like a lot of the different stories that you had to share about everything from filmmaking, using these VR technologies, using the stereoscopic cameras, and bringing to life, I guess a new character on the global stage, as we would say. And we're looking forward to hearing more updates about, your work, and thanks so much. So, again, we've been speaking to Mr. Gary Yost, veteran filmmaker, software creator, and co-director of the WisdomVR Project inside COVID-19 film as well. So cheers, and please do keep us updated on your progress, and we're also wishing you all the best at the Emmys as well.
Oh, thanks, Damon, and I do appreciate the invite to talk about it. You take care and have a good rest of your day.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much. And if you guys enjoyed today's conversation, please like, share, and subscribe to our content so that you can always be kept in the loop. Feel free to also spread the word on conversations from XR Today with the XR News hashtag on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. This is Cureton from XR Today. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a good one. Cheers.